been a while since we've heard from our Fox and Friends. I don't know what's going on with those guys. We got to get back on the Fox and Friends beat. I miss them.
I'm sure in the Hamptons.
Okay, so here Brian Kilmeade is interviewing the Brownstone Institute founder Jeffrey Tucker. What do we know about the Brownstone Institute?
I think they're COVID minimizers related to like those folks who were saying like the Great Barrington Declaration.
Oh, is that right?
I'm pretty sure I can check on that.
But as soon as you call yourself an institute, we're here at the Majority Report Institute. Maybe we've got to come up with a new one.
Brownstone Institute looks to influence a post-lockdown world by generating new ideas in public health, scientific discourse, economics, and social theory.
I love that that's a description of the Brownstone Institute, but we just have them on to talk about how there's too much wokeness.
Well, because the actual permanent police state caused by the COVID lockdowns kind of didn't materialize.
Yeah, it's like the same reason why Dr. Oz is just anemic right now, right? So, because like the medical tyranny is not that
you're
current.
Basically getting what you want.
Yeah.
Let's this is just so awesome that what do you do? This clip answers the question. What do you do when you create a fake institute to pretend that we're living in an authoritarian state where COVID is a mechanism for control of humans? Well, of course, you pivot into complaining about all the black stuff at Thomas Jefferson's house.
All right, life, liberty, and the pursuit of wokeness. Yep, Thomas Jefferson's Monticello estate now accused of going woke after visitors say the founding father's home has been flipped to criticize Jefferson and trash his legacy. Sounds unbelievable, right? Jeffrey Tucker is the founder of the Brownstone Institute and just visited Monticello and is just as outraged as you would think he would be. So, Jeff, you want an educational day of one of America's indispensable men? What did you find?
Well, I went on the 4th of July, right, to pay homage to the great man who inspired emancipation of slaves, who brought us separation of church and state, the author of the...
You have to pause this. Inspired emancipation of slaves. Jefferson's emancipation inspired Jim Crow because it was, if we are going to stop the slavery, which I'm entirely invested in myself and not actually doing a whole lot to get out of, we're going to have to transport them back to Africa because they cannot coexist with us. So that's the type of getting rid of slavery that Jefferson set the table for.
This guy's such a dork too. Like, why do they worship these guys as if they're, gods? I mean, it really is just a bizarre fetish, but keep going.
Part of the Declaration of Independence that still inspires everybody today. All men are created equal and all this kind of stuff. A great architect, scholar, Thomas Jefferson. And instead I got, exactly the opposite. Debunking his history, his reputation, putting him down, demoralizing everybody on my tour. It was just sadly predictable too. These days, I just thought that maybe...
Pause it for 1 second. Didn't he start off by saying he was surprised by this?
Yes, he said he was
I went down there for one thing, but I got another thing. Of course, it was completely predictable. What? Why did you go expecting one thing and get a different thing that is completely predictable?
I went there with my weird boner for Thomas Jefferson, and nobody was engaging in this with me.
People were mocking my bow tie.
From this disease of wokeism, but I was sadly wrong.
It's a plan. Let's go infect the boards on these homes, these are museums, and go in there and take...
Pause it.
Boards of museums?
When he says infect, the people that are having a say are the Hemingses, the actual descendants of Thomas Jefferson, who had to fight for centuries to get recognized, that reality get recognized, and it wasn't recognized until DNA testing forced the hand of the white Jefferson descendants. who wanted to deny that. So that's the changes in the board. Is there's more it's actually good that the Hemings family gets some sort of inheritance from this plantation that built them along with other slaves, obviously.
All right, continue.
And do this whole thing from the slave perspective. I took this.
Go back.
This whole thing from the slave perspective.
On these homes, which is these are museums.
Go back to where we
and go in there and.
wokeism, but I was sadly wrong.
You know, it's a plan. Let's go infect the boards on these homes, which is these are museums, and go in there and take over and do this whole thing from the slave perspective. I took this tour. It's on Fox Nation. I did a whole thing. There's a whole tour there. You could talk about the whole slave community. No reason to pull any punches there. But to go to the main house and not talk about this incredible man is crazy.
They don't talk about Jefferson at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that what they're saying now? They're not. They're positive. They're saying the argument is that we don't talk about Jefferson at all.
And they included a mention of slaves in the main house? In the main house?
How much, like...
With all of the ornate, different kinds of furniture and the chandeliers. That's not for all the slave talk.
Field hands into the main house. What is going on here? You stay out in the field.
I mean, it's one thing to talk about it when you're in the slave quarters or even the fields, but... Let's keep this to the Enlightenment.
Form meeting function for the proper experience. We don't discuss the slaves in the main house.
We could have a discussion about maybe discussing the house slaves within the main house, but no field slaves allowed.
Yes.
None. They're not to be seen
Sally,
and not heard.
We can talk about Sally here, just briefly, of course. Nothing too explicit. But
and the romantic relationship that they engaged in. It was really a modern, historical rom-com.
Oh my God! Continue.
Noticed this, but the last time I went, it may have been a couple decades ago, really. But the house is full of grandeur. You know, there was a sense of majesty about the place. No longer. The place is filled with bric-a-brac. You know, it looks like there's a rummage sale going on there or something. They've got contemporary paintings festooning this and that. You can't even get out of the music room without having to be forced to look at some woke piece of art. And the surly tour guides who've been told to do this just keep putting him down. Every question that people are asking as they go through, did Thomas Jefferson invent that? And they'll say, oh, he never invented anything. His reputation is wildly overblown. He was just a tinkerer, nothing more than that. And it goes on like this, and it's depressing and demoralizing and truly upsetting. You would think that Monticello would be something of a sacred space. And there are people coming from all over the world to pay homage to this great man.
And then I also said, is the Easter Bunny real? And they said no. All of my dreams.
I was expecting a shrine, and instead I got a historical account of the actual reality.
They canceled the egg hunt because they said the Easter Bunny wasn't real.
This totally ruins my fanfic that I was planning about this.
Sacred space sounds a little like safe space.
A little bit.
It should be. We shouldn't hear any factual information there. We should continue to have our National Geographic, our Reader's Digest version of history. And by Reader's Digest, I mean, of course, from 1952.
Everyone knows that the main house is a safe space.
They started saying that the lost cause was a myth. Continue.
With a sense of piety and appreciation for the gift that he gave the world. It was a real gift of freedom. Right. And not a word about that.
It's unbelievable. Monticello, too, James Madison's home, the same thing has happened. I covered that over the weekend. Got to push back on this. It'll never happen in Mount Vernon because it's privately owned. So real quick, one of these other signs that were up there says this.
We can't keep going.
I do want to hear what the other sign is.
All men are created equal, close quote. Being lived up to in our country today, question mark. When will we know it? When will we know when it is? What does that, are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, this is the problem. The ironic thing about
one second. Pause for 1 second. I just want to blow past that for a moment because I don't want to even entertain the vague notion that we haven't quite attained that all men being created equal thing. Particularly this couple of weeks when we did hear that maybe there is significant interest in the Supreme Court to overturn marriage equality, let's say, for instance, or perhaps all sorts of other things like whatever. Let's move on to the next thing. Go ahead.
political life by the claim that he was a secret abolitionist, which he was in some ways. And certainly he has inspired
in some ways.
Lincoln. You know, there wouldn't have been a Lincoln if there hadn't been Thomas Jefferson. But you don't get that message at all. You get you go completely opposite. That he was a hypocrite, he was a liar, he was a bad person, and so on. And it's just truly heartbreaking. I mean, I feel bad for Jefferson's legacy. I mostly in that day, well, I was sad myself because it's the last thing I expected. Although looking back, I realized, okay. But all the other people on my tour, they just were left demoralized and sad, and robbed of 40.
But Jeff,
$40.
it can't stand. It can't stand. You're going to start that story in the Washington Times about the Madison House. That's going to start, and people are going to push back.
Hey, just a reminder. Okay, stop it now. Stop. We've heard enough. Just a reminder as to what the Brownstone Institute is. Again, would you please read it? The Brownstone Institute
looks to influence a post-lockdown world by generating new ideas in public health, scientific discourse, economics, and social theory.
It's a front.
I'm just trying to think. Okay. Well, when that runs out of juice and we're not getting donations for that, let's go complain about wokeism and history at Monticello.
Yeah, well, this guy it's sort of a return to form for this guy. He was assistant to Lou Rockwell, who people may remember from Ron Paul's newsletters. Just a little bit of the content from Ron Paul's newsletters.
Well, now to be clear, Ron Paul never signed off on any of these. I mean, he literally
published them.
He literally signed them, but he didn't sign off.
Yeah, that was boilerplate.
Yeah.
But a newsletter where you can read things like, given the inefficiencies of what D.C. laughingly calls the criminal justice system, I think we can safely assume that 95% of the black males in that city are semi-criminal, are entirely criminal. And there's a whole bunch of things. There's apparently a suggested black activist wanted to rename New York City in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. So they said they should rename it Welfaria, Zooville, Rape Town, Dirtburg, or Lazyopolis. So that's where this guy's coming from. This is what it looks like when mainstream media launders a crypto racist.
Yep.
And you know who another big Lou Rockwell fan there is, who's also pretty prominent? One Blake Masters. A contributor.
I'm on this website, and I'm sorry, just one more little tidbit. There's just little blurbs here for articles. One's on what weakened immune systems have wrought for children. Unfortunately, most people associate malnutrition with poverty. Unfortunately, chemical-associated malnutrition and dehydration exponentially grew during the COVID lockdowns to become a widespread and urgent problem all over the world. So basically saying kids were quarantined to such a degree and probably had the vaccines, and so now that's causing more harm than good.
These racists are really concerned about the people disproportionately affected by COVID. That's why they want to get everyone back to working at restaurants.